Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So last year, while families were struggling to make ends meet during a pandemic, vulture investors saw a big opportunity. Private equity firms and other Wall Street investors were busy scooping up homes in communities across the country, even in the middle of an historic housing shortage. So I recently wrote a letter to a few of the largest investors to get answers about their activities in the housing market. And they all told me not to worry. They gave similar defenses to what was going on. Part one, they told me that institutional investors play a relatively small role in the housing market. And part two, they said that by buying up homes to convert rentals, they were increasing the rental supply and making rental housing more accessible for those who prefer to rent. So I want to see if we can just explore those two defenses from the industry. Mr. Waller, I'd like to start with you. Institutional investors are telling us that they're just a small player in the housing market. You work closely with families across the state of Georgia. Is that what you're seeing on the ground?
The role of institutional investors is growing and growing quickly. So, if you look at some of the research that's available, just, I guess, in the third quarter of last year, I think they were responsible for about 40% of single-family home purchases in the Atlanta area.
40%?
And they're in the 5-county region, they were also responsible for, I think, 76% of the eviction filings in the end of last year.
Wow. So, thank you. We've reached the point where nationwide, more than 1 in every 4 single-family homes in America is purchased by investors. And that is a huge increase. And the vast majority of investor purchases, more than 75%, were made in cash, which is really hard for a family to compete with. So if investors are buying up more and more homes and new construction isn't keeping up, who gets the short end of the stick? And I think the answer is pretty clear. Families that dream of buying their first home. When investor home purchases skyrocketed last year, the share of purchases by first-time home buyers, most of whom can't compete with those all-cash offers, fell to its lowest level since the crash of 2008. So, Ms. Martin, let me ask you, you've spent 14 years leading South Euclid's housing department. Families are being priced out of home ownership across the country, forcing many of them to rent, even if they would have preferred to buy. Are big investors at least making it easier for families to access affordable rental housing the way that they claim they are?
Absolutely not. In my experience, that's not what's happening at all. I think what we're seeing on the ground is more scarcity. We're seeing more of a concentration of poverty as tenants are forced to find substandard housing in areas that they didn't want to live in because the opportunities in areas that they would like to live in are so scarce. These units are getting locked up and locked out of most of the people, who are seeking housing just don't have a shot at it.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ms. Martin, and thank you, Mr. Waller. I appreciate your information on this. Institutional investors like to say that they are helping out renters and potential home buyers across the country. But that's just the story they want to tell while they just keep raking in the profits. With mountains of cash on hand and access to exclusive listing, these Wall Street firms are buying up already scarce homes from right under American families. And then they jack up rents and exacerbate the inflation that is straining family pocketbooks. So think about what this means. Big investors are blocking the main path that families have traditionally had to build wealth and financial security, that is, buy a home. They are also standing in the way of opportunities to narrow the racial home ownership gap and the racial wealth gap that are a blight on our country. So there's a lot we need to do to fix the housing crisis, but we should start with building more housing, just as Build Back Better would do. But we also need to loosen the grip that Wall Street investors have on our housing market. This would help level the playing field so that every family in America has an opportunity to pursue the dream of owning a home. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Warren. Senator Ossoff from Georgia is recognized.